How's it going, guys? Andy here. Welcome back to the Potting Shed. Today I want to talk to you about orchids, and more specifically how to get your orchids to reflower, because I think a lot of people have been very frustrated by the experience. They have a beautiful flowering orchid when they take it home from the garden centre or their local store, and after it finishes flowering they just end up with a sad bunch of leaves that just sit there looking at them, and they want it to reflower, and even worse, they might even just throw it out. So firstly, don't throw your orchid out after it finishes flowering. You can get it to reflower, and in this video I'm going to go through the steps you need to take to get your orchid to reflower. Are you ready? Let's go. So in this video we're going to be talking mainly about the moth orchid, which is generally the most common form of orchid that you're likely to see in your local store and take home with you. There are a few slight discrepancies with some of the other slightly more rarer varieties, but we're going to deal with the most popular type here, which is the moth orchid. The orchid is an epiphyte, which means it grows on other plants, generally on trees, high up in the canopy in tropical rainforests. It doesn't feed off the tree. That would be parasitic or a parasite. It simply uses it as a structure to cling onto and get the light it needs and the nutrients from rain. So for that reason, it doesn't really need soil in the normal sense like you would expect a normal houseplant to have soil. It doesn't need that. All it needs is something to anchor it into the pot. So generally we see orchids kept in pine bark, or as it's sold in houseplant shops, orchid bark. Here we go. I've got some here. As you can see, see if we can get that in there. It's just simply small pieces of pine bark. Now this is great. This is great for orchids because the roots go into it and can intermingle. It anchors the plant into the pot and enables the water to flow through very easily without it getting too saturated for too long. All orchids should have perforations in the bottom of the pot, so when you're watering it, you're just letting the water run all the way through. But we'll talk a little bit more about watering in a short while. So what do you need to do to get your orchid to reflower? Well, firstly, just let it have a rest. Your orchid would have been flowering for the last 2, 3 or even 4 months, and it's spent all of its energy, and after it finishes flowering it'll die back, and it just needs a bit of a rest to recover and build up some more energy before it flowers again. And while it's having a rest, this is what you need to do to give it everything it needs to come back and flower strongly when it's ready. So let's talk about light. Orchids really appreciate indirect light. So if you've got a windowsill with bright, harsh sun coming in, it's going to be too much for it, and it's going to burn the leaves. Let me show you. Here we are. This is a good example of scorched leaves. If you put this big fleshy leaf in direct sun, this is what's going to happen. So if you've got a leaf like this, it's been scorched by the sun. It's not going to kill it, but it doesn't look very nice, and this leaf is now damaged. As you can see, this one has bounced back, and we've got a nice new leaf coming through here, and you can see a nice new one coming through here as well. So it's not terminal, but it doesn't look good, and your orchid isn't going to thrive, okay? So where are you going to put it? If you've got the sun coming directly on one side of your house, maybe you've got a windowsill on the other side of the house where it's always light, but it never gets the sun beaming through the window. That's perfect. It's going to really like that quality of indirect sun, and you can keep it in bright light, but it's never going to get scorched. That's perfect. Next is water. Now, orchids will really prefer rainwater if you can get it. I know it's not always easy to harvest and store rainwater, and if you live in an apartment or don't have the resources, then I appreciate it's not always easy to keep and use. Alternatively, if you've got reverse osmosis RO water that's been demineralized, then that is really good as well, because it's going to take out the harsh chemicals that are in tap water. That's the second best. Lastly, if you don't have any of those things, then you can use tap water, but the best thing to do is fill your watering can or whatever you use 24 hours ahead, a few days ahead, fill it up and just leave it to the side somewhere. And that gives the water a chance to do two things. Firstly, acclimatize to your temperature, so it might warm up a little bit, which is also good. And also some of those heavy metals and maybe the chlorine that might be used in the tap water to purify it to be able to be safe to drink, that will gas off in time over the 24-48 hour period. So it just makes it a little bit better for the plants. So when you water it, it's best to water occasionally, but give it a good soak. So let me show you. If you've got your plant like this, quite often it will be in a clear container like this because it allows the sun to get to the roots, and that is what it prefers, to get natural light onto the roots. It actually takes in nutrients from the light and the air, so that's why they're in clear pots. So if you water it, I'm just trying to get the right angle here. If you water it, you can get it in a sink maybe and pour the water all over the pot so it drains through the orchid bark, and make sure it goes all the way through. And what will happen is these roots will start to turn green and sort of swell up a little bit. So if the roots are fully watered, then they're a little bit swollen and they're green. When they're totally dried out, they will look like shriveled and white. So you know when to water it is when all of the pot is dry and the roots just start to turn from green, then light green, and then the greeny tinge will go. That's when they start to get that light tinge. You know they're dried out and they're ready to get a water again. Now, like a lot of plants, they like a good water, but they also need that time to use it and dry out. So don't keep it wet. Let it dry out. Once it gets to that lighter color in the roots, that's perfect time to water it again. And now lastly, and quite importantly, this is the step that a lot of people forget about and will make a big difference in getting your orchid to reflower, okay? And that is feeding your orchid. Now, obviously, it's just finished flowering. It needs to rest and recover, and the best way for it to recover is to take on nutrients. Now, if you go and buy an orchid fertilizer from the store, that's great. It doesn't really matter which one you get. Just grab one, and on the bottle it will tell you how to feed. So it will be, I don't know, it might have a cap and say up halfway up the cap is how much you put in per, I don't know, 5 liters of water, or half a gallon, I don't know, but it'll tell you on the bottle. My advice is to half that strength. So whatever they say, if it says put 6 drops in for a liter of water, put 3 drops in for a liter of water, or if it's half a capful, put a quarter of a capful, because what we want to do is feed little and often. It's much better for the orchid to get a more dilute feed on a regular basis than it is to get a full strength feed every now and again. Quite often people will just forget, and it might be 6 months before they get fed, which is not really any use at all. And secondly, if you get full strength, can be quite strong for it. And as you're watering directly onto the roots of the plant, you can risk burning the roots with the fertilizer potentially if it's too strong, especially if it's sat there on the roots on the surface and the sun's baking it. It might not do it any good. So my advice is just dilute that down by half and do it regularly. In the growing season, in spring and summer and early autumn, you can feed it, say, weekly, a week feed, 50% dilute feed on a weekly basis. When you water the plant, it's going to be very happy with that. And that way, it's going to take on all those nutrients, it's going to store them in the roots, and then when it's ready to flower again, it's going to flower with a lot more strength. You'll get a lot more abundance, a lot more flowers, a lot more flower spikes as well. And I think it will be the most happy, and your chance of getting a reflowering sooner is really enhanced by following that technique. So just to recap, indirect light, away from direct sun so you don't scorch the leaves. Rainwater if you can get it. Demineralized water is good, or at least water that's room temperature and been around for 24 hours is ideal. Feed regularly in the growing season, week 50% solution. That's what you're going to need to do. It's pretty straightforward, and you'll get a plethora of beautiful orchid flowers. And when they're done, you can do the same again. A lot of people say to me, Andy, do you keep the flower spike or do you cut it down? You know, a lot of people say, no, you can't cut it down. It will reflower on the same spike. It will, but here's the thing. In my experience, I think if you cut that down, it will reflower and grow back a lot stronger than what you'll get on the original flower spike. So my way of doing it is to cut that down to the base and it will grow again. I've got another one to show you, okay? This one is a good example. Again, I don't know, the lights behind know how good you'll be able to see, but down the bottom here, there is an old flower spike that's been cut down. Over here is an old flower spike that's been cut down. It's probably focusing on my face, I apologize. Well, there we go. Yeah, anyway, 2 old flower spikes, and if you can see here, it's come from the center, and there is a new one coming out here, and we have 1 branch here, 1 branch here with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 buds on it here, and another one coming up. This will be another branch here, and so we have, this one is in the process of reflowering. This one is in the process of just finishing. This has been flowering for about 3 months now. It's pretty tuckered out. So the last few flowers, I think this will be it from it now, because it had a huge amount of flowers on this one. So the last few dainty flowers, you get that? Beautiful. And this one here is in the dormancy period, where it's just gathering energy, and it will be ready to go soon enough as well. So that's the 3 stages. That's what you're going to have to remember. And a few people said to me, can you do like cheat sheets or something like that? Because I appreciate some people like printouts, just like having things written down and stuff. So what I thought I'd do, if it's any use to you, let me know if it is useful or not down in the comments. But what I'll do is like a cheat sheet of all of that information down, and just a summary, a synopsis, if you will, so you can remember, stick it on your fridge, keep it next to your orchid, or maybe even make a file and keep all your sort of cheat sheets in one file, if you like, whatever you want to do. But I'll put a link down in the description where you can click on it, put in your email, and I will email that cheat sheet over to you, so you can have them on hand if you want to print it out and you just like to have something physical. All good, I don't mind doing that. As always, hit me up on Instagram at Houseplant Hacks if you've got some orchids that you want to share with me. I love seeing your pictures. It's always great to see. Let me know in the comments if you have any orchid care tips or any questions about orchids. Always happy to help if I can. All right, that really is it for this one. Thank you for bearing with me, and thank you for watching. Subscribe if you enjoy houseplant videos, new ones coming out every week. Thanks guys, I'll catch you again soon.